Allen Lund Company has new offices in Ogden, Utah and Indianapolis, Indiana. Check allenlund.com to reach them.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Redding.
The U.S. EPA held a hearing earlier this week regarding whether California should get a waiver allowing it to move forward with its Advanced Clean Fleets initiative. And not only truckers based there, but also truckers who simply run in and out of the state may be affected. I'll cover that and more with OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. We've talked a lot on the program about how to avoid bad brokers and what to do if you get scammed by one. But how do you warn others about those bad brokers? I'll talk with Tom Crowley and Aaron Lynch of OOIDA's Compliance Department. And finally, Marty Ellis is still hearing about some of the hot topics of the day, including a longtime motor carrier going out of business and a problem a number of truckers are having with toll roads and transponders. I'll talk with the man who drives the spirit of the American trucker. But first, the news with Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. Our top story today. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency held what can only be described as a marathon public hearing on Wednesday, dedicated to California's Advanced Clean Fleets waiver request, and the trucking industry showed up in force. Over several hours of testimony, stakeholders told the EPA over and over again that forcing misguided and rushed mandates on the trucking industry is not the best way to reach environmental goals. The Advanced Clean Fleets regulation requires that 100% of manufacturers' sales be zero tailpipe emission trucks by 2036. Drayage operations, government fleets, and high-priority fleets with 50 or more vehicles are affected by the regulation. The rule from the California Air Resources Board took effect in January but has not been enforced yet because the state must obtain a waiver from the EPA before moving forward with stricter rules. Although the rule applies mostly to large fleets, OOIDA told the EPA that its members are concerned about the mandate on truck manufacturers as well as the possibility of future regulations directed at small trucking operations. Jay Grimes, OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, spoke on behalf of the association during Wednesday's hearing. He referenced a number of concerns, including the lack of charging infrastructure and mileage range as being barriers to the mandate.
All truckers believe in improving air quality. However, ACF is an example of a rushed environmental rule that does not account for manufacturing lead time, practical vehicle market conditions, and in this case, operational feasibility. As you will hear from the American truck dealers, manufacturers do not presently have a truck with a CARB-compliant engine for sale to meet the rule's requirements. Furthermore, purchasing zero-emissions heavy-duty vehicles is challenging for motor carriers in the absence of national and regional charging infrastructure networks. Professional drivers are skeptical of ZEV costs, mileage range, electric battery weight and safety, charging time, and availability. Granting the waiver could also impose a harmful national truck policy for owner-operators and one that appears detrimental for truck manufacturers and other industry stakeholders. Additionally, the waiver would place further regulatory burdens on the infrastructure needs of other states. Pushing forward with this waiver or forcing further misguided environmental rules on the trucking industry will not achieve the desired heavy-duty vehicle emissions outcomes.
As Grimes referenced there, the American Truck Dealers was also represented at the hearing. Kim Mesfin, president of Affinity Truck Center in California, spoke on behalf of the association. She told the EPA that the rule ignores the practical needs of the trucking industry.
ATD supports policies that reduce greenhouse gas emissions for America's trucks, and truck dealers are making a $1 billion investment this decade to sell and service ZEVs. But reducing emission requires more than just imposing new standards. The successful path must accommodate the crucial considerations of the commercial truck industry and our country, which depends on trucks to deliver everything. When emission standards are too stringent and rushed, they result in business closures, job losses, and delayed environmental benefits. That is precisely the situation California truck dealers are facing today due to CARB's technology forcing emission standards. To date, manufacturers do not have a truck with CARB-compliant engine for sale. Customers are also not purchasing model year 2024 engines because under the rules, dealers can only sell a diesel truck if they sell an electric truck first. But customers are reluctant to purchase electric trucks due to cost, lack of charging, and performance challenges. California truck sales are gridlocked by CARB's aggressive standards. The EPA should have heeded ATD's advice and required CARB to revise its Act rule to reflect the minimum lead time and stability periods mandated as a condition for receiving a waiver.
The organization encouraged the EPA to deny the waiver and to require CARB to comply with the Clean Air Act's lead time requirements. Doing so, Mesfin said, will give the industry, market, and infrastructure time to catch up. In addition to trucking representatives, the hearing was flooded with representatives of the bus industry and environmentalists. Like the trucking industry, bus and motor coach stakeholders also oppose the mandate. They largely said that infrastructure is not ready and that a bus is already an environmentally friendly mode of travel as it takes cars off the road. Environmentalists, including many members of the Sierra Club, urged the EPA to grant the waiver, citing health concerns and air pollution disproportionately affecting minorities and low-income families. Stephen Sondheim, representing the Sierra Club, promoted the rule while also acknowledging the burden placed on truckers.
We need to make it easier for truckers to adapt to this, also by providing incentives and investment.
We'll have more on Wednesday's hearing a little later on in the show when Jay Grimes of OOIDA returns. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration has removed 2 electronic logging devices from its list of registered devices. The agency says Blue Star ELD and Reliable ELD had their status revoked because they failed to meet minimum standards. If you have either ELD, you should stop using it immediately and revert to paper logs or logging software to record hours of service data. You'll also need to replace the revoked ELD with a compliant one by October 14th. TFI International just got a little bigger. The company just acquired 2 other Canada-based carriers, CMW Express and its sister company, FRL Express. Terms of the deal were not announced. TFI made headlines late last year with the acquisition of Dasky. That's been followed in recent months by a string of smaller deals. Meanwhile, an Alabama-based trucking company has been acquired by a bigger Kentucky-based trucking company to make up an even bigger trucking company. Haney & White Enterprise is doing the acquiring. B.R. Williams Trucking and B.R. Williams LTL Logistics is the one being acquired. The move was announced in a news release. B.R. Williams has been family-owned and operated since 1958. Combined, the new company will operate as BRW with 175 tractors, more than 700 trailers, and 5 warehouses across locations in Kentucky, Georgia, Alabama, and Florida. And finally, a number of cities in North Texas are trying out a new system that gives priority to commercial vehicles at traffic signals. The North Central Texas Council of Governments said it's designed with efficiency and traffic flow in mind. Using technology that works in step with traffic management systems, the so-called Freight Signal Optimization Program works by giving commercial vehicles priority at intersections, reducing the number of red lights they hit. It's being deployed at more than 500 traffic signals in areas that serve as important freight corridors, including in the cities of Arlington and Fort Worth, among others. The program is funded through U.S. DOT grants. That's Landline Now News for today. I'm Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Scott. Do you have a news tip? Maybe you have a comment about something you heard on the air, or maybe you just have a question about something happening in the trucking industry. Email us at landlinenow@ooida.com. Again, that email address is landlinenow@ooida.com. Starting Friday, Marty Ellis and OOIDA's tour truck, The Spirit of the American Trucker, will be at the Great Salt Lake Truck Show. That takes place at Thanksgiving Point Electric Park in Lehi, Utah. Stop in, say hi to Marty, and join OOIDA for a $10 discount. You can write a letter to your elected officials in Congress or look up contact information for lawmakers on the state and federal level by using the website fightingfortruckers.com. Next, I'll cover EPA's hearing about California's emission regulations with OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. Tom Crowley and Aaron Lynch of OOIDA's Compliance Department discuss warning others about bad brokers, and I'll talk about a motor carrier closing and trouble with toll transponders with Spirit driver Marty Ellis. We'll be back in just a moment. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Every year, 28 million people are trafficked globally. The Your Roads, Their Freedom campaign seeks to raise awareness in the transport industry. Truck and bus drivers, be vigilant on the roads. If you see something suspicious, text 233-733 or be free.
Truckdown.com. Whenever you have a breakdown, you need Truckdown.com. 24/7 access to 40,000 verified heavy-duty repair vendors nationwide. Truckdown verified, vendor qualified. Truckdown.com.
Firestone tires are for more of everything, with more durability for more miles and more confidence in your fleet. Firestone's tested tires help fleets save with value where it matters most. Learn more at bridgestonenationalfleet.com/4moremiles.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency held a hearing earlier this week regarding whether California should get a waiver allowing it to move forward with its Advanced Clean Fleets initiative. And not only truckers based there, but also truckers who simply run in and out of the state may be affected. Welcome back to Landline Now. This is Regulatory Roundup, and I'm Mark Rettig. I'm joined, as always, by OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. Jay, thanks for joining me.
Good to be with you.
So let's kind of start with this, because I'm sure there's folks out there that don't know. Can you explain what the California Clean Fleets Initiative is?
Yeah, so this is a California law that they passed back in 2023 that sets in a few different environmental and emissions provisions. Mainly, this is going to only apply to drayage operations, state and local government fleets, and then what they call high priority fleets, large fleets, which are fleets with 50 or more vehicles or with more than $50 million in annual revenue. And it basically sets out a timeline for transitioning their fleets into zero-emission vehicles. And supposed to start for drayage trucks specifically to be zero emissions earlier this year. However, given some legal challenges, the fact that this regulation requires a waiver from the Environmental Protection Agency to go into effect, compliance enforcement has been delayed, and EPA is in the process of gathering public feedback on if they should issue a waiver for this Advanced Clean Fleets rule.
And just to clarify, although I think you were very clear, but I always feel like this needs repetition. This would not affect individual owner-operators on their own authority.
Correct. For the most part. Now, there is also a provision in 2036 as part of this rule that completely bans the sale of internal combustion engines in California beginning in 2036. So that part would apply to all vehicles, could certainly indirectly impact owner-operators who 10, 12 years from now want to buy a vehicle in California.
So let's talk about this hearing I mentioned at the beginning. And I want you to give us some examples of who spoke at this thing and kind of what they had to offer.
Yeah, so there were hundreds of speakers. Each got about 3 minutes to provide their input on this specific waiver, on the ACF rule, environmental emissions at large. And it was really sort of various stakeholders. You had a lot of motor coach representatives, motor carrier representatives, individual drivers, individual citizens, and a whole host of different environmental and activist groups and individuals who want this waiver granted as soon as possible. So some various perspectives on this rule and really about the trucking industry, environmental regulations, clean air, climate change, and again, a whole host of speakers. It went quite on throughout the day on Wednesday, but an opportunity for EPA to hear from the public on the waiver.
Now, at the point we're talking right now, you're scheduled to be among the speakers yet to come. What are some of the points that you plan to offer here?
Yeah, really, ACF, especially this provision about all new California medium and heavy-duty trucks must be zero emissions beginning in 2036, has certainly raised some questions for owner-operators, even though most of these provisions won't apply to small businesses. And also wanted to, going to raise, concerns that this regulation may be a sign of things to come for future CARB regulations and what aspects of this advanced clean fleets rule could be implemented for small fleets and other commercial vehicles that are currently outside the scope of ACF. And again, another example of ACF being a set of unworkable and unaffordable emissions rules for California small businesses. Certainly echoes some of the proposals we've seen from EPA lately in terms of whether it was the heavy-duty NOx emissions rule or the recently finalized Phase 3 emissions rules for heavy-duty vehicles. Again, wondering if this is going to be another rushed environmental mandate. It's kind of, we've heard concerns from entities that are directly impacted by ACF is that does not provide enough lead manufacturing time, is not reflective of practical vehicle market conditions. I think the American Truck Dealer said that there's no manufacturers that are ready to comply with this rule right now, and it makes it even a tougher challenges for customers to purchase vehicles, especially when you throw in driver and motor carrier concerns about the reliability of a national, even regional charging infrastructure networks for CMVs, and the fact that professional drivers remain skeptical of EV costs, mileage range, battery weight and safety. How long is it going to take you to charge the vehicle? And is there going to be a charging station available? Just a whole lot of unanswered questions on EV implementation, achievable EV efficiency, the EV costs, and a lot of those questions aren't going to be answered if this waiver goes through and some of these provisions start going into effect in California.
I want to clarify one thing you said earlier. You said that there's an additional provision in there regarding no trucks sold in California can be internal combustion engine. I think, was that 2050?
2036.
2036, even earlier. So you can, correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah. Does that mean that you could buy a truck in another state and bring it in? Or is it just trucks sold there? What's the case there?
Well, it's gonna be. It kind of depends if you're part of this high fleet. If you're buying a truck, but for the individual owner operator at this point, you still should be okay. Now, I think the writing is a little bit on the wall that CARB is going to start putting out some rules and regulations to come that's going to impact more medium and heavy duty and commercial vehicles that are on the road, not just the high priority fleets with 50 or more vehicles or 50 million in revenue.
Okay. Now, with the hearing over, do truckers have any other opportunities to make their views known on this topic to EPA?
Yeah, so the public docket is still going to be out through September 16th, and you can do that on regulations.gov. The docket number is EPA-HQ-OAR-2023-0589. I'm sure we'll have all the links up.
Yes.
If they're not already. But yeah, the virtual public hearing was this week, but you've still got another month or so to provide formal written comments on the waiver. And then, of course, EPA will review the comments and eventually make their decision.
Okay. Well, we can't discuss regulations here without mentioning FMCSA at least once, I think. Right. And in fact, the agency is asking truckers and others for their views on whether existing guidance should be revised. And I think most people, even the people that deal with the regulations daily, are probably not aware of what we call guidance. What do we mean by that term here?
The best way that I can kind of describe it, it's sort of a frequently asked questions list that FMCSA provides to hopefully give motor carriers and other industry stakeholders kind of roadmap, best information possible. But it's always good to remind everyone that the guidance does not act as regulation. This can sometimes create a little bit of confusion and some gray area, but it's kind of FMCSA's way, without going through the long and drawn-out regulatory and rulemaking process, to provide kind of some advice on different compliance and regulatory questions.
So how is that used out in the real world? Because I know I've been told before that there are some enforcement people that just look at the guidance and think, so this is how I'm supposed to enforce this. They treat it like a regulation.
Yeah, and that can be problematic, especially in cases where perhaps enforcement and DOT are kind of overstepping the bounds of the guidance. So I think FMCSA, for the most part, tries to kind of, as best they can, be clear in the guidance and be really specific about what regulation it's applying to, even what specific question within the regulation that it does apply to. But kind of inevitably, you're going to have some confusion. And, that's one of the questions that FMCSA is offering in this latest notice. And this kind of review of regulatory guidance is mandated since the FAST Act that FMCSA, DOT, every 5 years have kind of, have to undertake a review, update their regulatory guidance, and FMCSA wants to kind of gather feedback on if regulatory guidance is helpful or if it's necessary, if it should be done away with completely. Also want to hear some specific examples on guidance that may need to be amended or removed altogether. So an opportunity to provide some comments here for FMCSA as they kind of undergo this required process.
So I'm wondering if you can talk about some of the specific guidance related to trucking that has been a concern either on the part of truckers or others.
Well, certainly one that stands out and has kind of been under discussion and debate within the last few years is guidance that FMCSA put out a few years ago, expanding the use of personal conveyance, where they really clarified through the guidance that drivers could use personal conveyance if the vehicle was unladen, and really protected, I think, the intent of personal conveyance, where driver could use the vehicle for their personal use if they're not completing a delivery or under hours of service regulations. Now, we've seen a lot of entities, most notably the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance, as well as some safety advocate groups that want to put either a time limit or a mileage limit on the use of personal conveyance. And we have always advocated against that and opposed that. These groups have petitioned FMCSA to implement a limit on personal conveyance. And as of now, FMCSA has not granted any of those petitions. I'm sure this is going to be brought up in some of the public comments that FMCSA receives on this guidance review, trying to kind of overturn the guidance that has been in place. Certainly, we are going to, state the opposite, that this guidance, I think, has helped drivers for the most part, protects the use of personal conveyance, and drivers who own their vehicle have that right to personal conveyance.
Well, and that's one I would think, especially with the enforcement on the ground, that does need some degree of guidance to clarify, because we have enforcement officers that basically act as if there is a limit.
That's true. And, when you look at the regulation, with this guidance kind of supporting that, and it does, really, I think it's supposed to give a lot of flexibility to the drivers who are using personal conveyance. In some cases, it doesn't always work out that way, but I think the rules, the guidance are going to be on the motor carrier side for the most part under personal conveyance. That's why it's going to be important to uphold this guidance, to uphold the regulation, and really we're going to continue to kind of encourage FMCSA not to establish any type of time or mileage limit on personal conveyance. 30-day comment period on this one. Again, we'll have the links to comment on. So if you outside of personal conveyance, there's, hundreds of these guidance documents that FMCSA has issued over the years. So a lot to provide feedback on. But if there's specific instances where guidance has been helpful or hurtful, make sure you have your opinion heard.
Excellent. Jay, thank you very much. I sure appreciate it.
Thank you.
I've been talking with OOIDA Director of Federal Affairs, Jay Grimes. We'll be back in just a moment. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Today's rising costs affect everyone. Replace your harmonic damper with a genuine VibraTech TVD viscous damper to prevent costly repairs and downtime. Keep your money in your pocket and your truck on the road with VibraTech TVD. Recommended replacement at 500,000 miles or 15,000 hours.
Ready to make more money? Use a better load board. For a limited time, get 50% off TruckStop Load Board Pro. Just go to truckstop.com/go and enter promo code READY2024 when you purchase Load Board Pro.
Are you tired of the IRS following you around like a dark cloud? Call 888-557-4020 and get your life back.
Landline Now, welcome back. We've talked a lot on the program lately about how to avoid bad brokers and what to do if you get scammed by one. But how do you warn other truckers about those bad brokers? Here to discuss that and some other broker topics are Tom Crowley and Aaron Lynch of OOIDA's Compliance Department. Guys, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having us, Mark.
Thanks as always, Mark.
This is kind of an odd topic, this idea of a broker's credit report. And first of all, this is not like your credit report as a person at all. What exactly do we mean by a broker's credit report, and who tracks that?
Well, that's the credit report. That's something that is kind of misleading because, personally or for business, you have your FICO credit report. That's not what we're looking at here. I mean, you're not looking at a broker's credit report as in that. You're looking to see, do they most generally pay their carriers? Now, there are some factoring companies that some folks use that have credit reporting. They say they're credit reporting, but it's basically they give you days to pay on most brokers, some idea on how they operate their business. But there's nothing that if a carrier is not paid and they file against a bond, if the claim is successful and they pull off the bond, well, then we know there's some rules in place that are supposed to revoke their authority until that bond is replenished. But that is just about it. Other than that, looking at your factoring website and what they say the days to pay are, that is really about the only credit report that you get on a broker.
And you usually see them going back 30, 60, 90 days. It'll tell you a lot of times how many carriers are reporting on them because that's who they actually have as far as that goes that's factoring through them. So it's a decent tool. I would say it's imperfect because a lot of times it's just the average. It may not necessarily apply to you. That you may get paid in 46 days and then someone else gets paid in 18. The average around there is probably about 32 days at that point.
Now, I remember there used to be, you mentioned the factoring companies, but there used to be some other companies that did this type of thing. I remember years ago, RTS, I think it was, had credit reports on brokers. Are there still some of these companies outside of the factoring companies that do this?
Well, as you mentioned, RTS, they are a factoring company.
Ah, okay.
And they are the one that does have, if you look on a OOIDA website, I believe there's a link on there to use RTS credit for brokers. And that's the one that we look at. RTS is a big factoring company. They factor a lot of brokers, and they give you a pretty reasonable estimate on what their average days to pay is and how many instances there are. But again, that is only credit with carriers.
Right.
That's not do they pay their other bills on time or have they been around for very long or anything else. I mean, that's still due diligence on the carrier to see. Don't, as we mentioned in other shows, don't work with brand new brokers. I mean, I'm not kicking brand new brokers, but if you've only been in business not very long, 3-6 months, that's where we see most of the scams come in. So stay away from those.
And I can see some other problems with these credit reports. I mean, for example, they would definitely tell you if someone hasn't paid their bills, but there's nothing in there saying they have, is there?
No, there's really not. I mean, there's so many options for brokers to look at carriers. but there are very few options for carriers to look at brokers. And it just really comes down to, if you're in a situation where they're trying to hurry you along, we need to hurry up and pick up this load, trying to make it something that's an emergency. Slow down, take your time, and look around, because that's usually when you get taken.
Well, and the only alternative that I could think of to tell someone on this subject would be to call the actual bond company, the insured, and find out if the bond's been hit, and if so, how many times. They're not going to tell you a lot of information, but they should be able to verify as far as that goes, and that's a way to see if they've been paying their bills or not as well. It's an imperfect way, but that's about the only alternative other than trying to put some kind of tracking mechanisms and making them public information and putting a list together as far as that goes.
Yeah, the FMCSA, of course, we've got the licensed and insured information where you can go and see if the bond is in effect and if it's been put in for notice of cancellation. But other than that, it's buyer beware.
Let's talk a little bit about what kind of loads you can file for the bond on, because this is something I think a lot of people don't know. There are loads that you can. There are loads where you cannot file on the bond. What are the requirements in order for you to be able to file on a bond based on the load?
Well, a lot of it is based on regulated freight. If it's regulated freight, things that are not regulated freight most generally is processed freight. But things that are not regulated would be produce, which people don't realize. Produce loads you can't file on a bond. Produce, fresh fish, chicken, Christmas trees, stuff like this. Stuff that would come from a nursery or from a fresh producer. Those are a lot of things that would be exempt from the filing requirements. Another thing is it an interstate or intrastate load? Does it originate within one state and deliver within that same state? Then that is an intrastate load, and you can't file on the bond. It has to go across state lines. And those are some of the things. I get calls from produce haulers who are they're floored when I tell them they can't file on a bond for that load of produce that they hauled. I do recommend to them that they call the bonding company and verify, but that is definitely the way that comes down.
Well, and keep in mind, there's theories out there that some brokers specifically only broker non-regulated freight.
And non-regulated freight, keep in mind, the broker doesn't have to be, they don't have to have FMCSA authority. They don't have to have a bond in place. Non-regulated freight, and this goes back to prior to deregulation. But non-regulated freight, there are just not a lot of rules over, the payment and how things have to occur. Where regulated freight, there are rules over there. Whether they're enforced or not is another story. But if it's regulated, so just keep in mind your non-regulated freight and your intrastate loads you can't file on a bond over.
And there's a really helpful tool for that. It's called Administrative Ruling 119 or 119. You want to look that up, familiarize yourself with some of that. It's probably 30 pages long, but maybe print that out and have that as some guidance. That way you can check that every now and then if you have a question, especially if in regards to food products. That's where you see a lot of this happening.
Yeah, and as far as food products, I'd say if it's processed, then it's more than likely regulated. If it's unprocessed or fresh from the field or, watermelons or something like that, it would fall into that non-regulated freight product.
Well, and this is something that maybe goes back way before you're actually hauling loads. When you're looking at setting up your carrier and you're deciding what niche in the market you're going to fill, what kind of freight you're going to haul, where you're going to haul it, this is the kind of research you need to be doing then so that you don't get caught in this situation in the first place.
This is true. And going back to when you're setting up your authority, there's a lot of research that needs to be done that a lot of folks don't realize. They think that, you just get your authority in place, got a truck, just get out there and work. There's more to it than that. You definitely want to do the research as to what type of freight you're going to haul, what the commodity, the lanes that you're going to be in, who your competition is. There's a lot of research that can be done there.
Well, and there's a lot of people that just don't know what they don't know. And they don't know what questions to ask or what the right questions are, in fact, to ask. So a lot of it comes back to education as well, and that's what we're here for.
Yeah, absolutely. Compliance department, that is what we're here for.
Okay. Let's go on to one other topic in the time we have left, and this is dealing with these bonding companies, the people that actually provide the bonds to the brokers. And this was in a notice that your department sent out that small carriers seem to be of the misunderstanding that bond companies are there for the protection of the carrier. But then they seem to take the broker's side in just about everything. And I think there's a basic misconception there about what these bonding companies are there for. And explain what we're talking about here.
Yeah, well, I mean, the bonding company, the bond is supposed to be there for if the carrier is not paid, they have a backup they can file on the bond to be paid. But as we discussed, there are regulated and non-regulated loads. That makes a difference. And then again, the bonds, we do hear of a lot more carriers filing on a bond, but that has to do with a lot of fraud that's in the industry. And these brokers that pop up, they're around for 3 months. They get $1 million worth of freight rolling down the road, and then they disappear. You got a $75,000 bond, and you may have $1 million worth of haul rates out there, and it just doesn't work out well for most motor carriers. The bond is supposed to be there for the motor carrier to get paid if the broker goes belly up, but the bond is insufficient, just to say the least.
Well, and furthermore, to kind of play off what Tom said, you have to, a lot of these carriers are filing on the bond not knowing that what they're filing on, as far as that goes, is insufficient, and meaning that they're filing on deductions because maybe they were late. They're filing on, a deduction for X, Y, and Z, and that's not something that a bond company will actually pay out on, things of that nature. They're filing on certain things that aren't meeting the criteria of the actual insurance itself.
And that's a good point Aaron brought up, because detention time, layover pay, any accessorial fees, you can't file on a bond for those. It is for the line haul or the rate only.
Or they won't accept a claim if there's an actual claim on the load itself.
Yeah. If the broker, and this is another issue, if the broker says, hey, there's a claim on this load, essentially that's the end of it. The bond company won't pay out. They say there's a claim, and they'll wait for that claim to be resolved. And there's just so many ways that a motor carrier can fall through the grate and end up in the crap down below. It's just really important to know your brokers, to know who you're hauling for, know the product you're hauling for or hauling, and just try to stay above board there, because if you get into the point where you got to file on a bond, chances are you're going to get paid much less than you should have.
And it seems to me too, there's another more basic concept at work here with these bonding companies, and that is, who do they see as their customer? I mean, you mentioned that they're supposed to be there to cover the carrier, but I've always believed, looking at any business, that the real customer is whoever's paying that company.
100% agree. Yeah, the bond is paid for by the broker, and so that is who the bond company would cater to, is the broker. So you call up and say you got a claim, the broker calls up and says, well, there's a claim on the claim, or there's a claim on the load. The bonding company is immediately, they're looking to, who pays my bill? Oh, yeah, Mr. Broker.
Yeah, because it doesn't pay for a insurance company to pay out. You lose money in that process.
Yeah. And I mean, even when you're talking about other kinds of insurance, I knew someone that worked for a home insurance company once, and they were in claims, and they said, my job is to make sure that I don't pay a penny more than what our company owes someone.
Yeah.
So, something to think about there.
Definitely something to think about.
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for the information, and hopefully we help some folks out today.
Thank you as always, Mark. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Mark.
I've been talking with Tom Crowley and Aaron Lynch of OOIDA's Compliance Department. And folks, as they mentioned, of course, this is what the Compliance Department is here for, is to inform, to educate, and to give you a path where you can help yourself or to help you. The number is 816-229-5791. Landline Now will be back in a moment.
Penske owns and operates some of the best-maintained vehicles on the planet. Our used trucks come with a 5-year maintenance report and pre-sale inspection. So if you're in the market for a top-quality pre-owned truck, look no further. Search our inventory today at PenskeUsedTrucks.com.
Control your toll costs and eliminate tolling headaches with Prepass Tolls. Prepass Tolls means toll volume discounts. Just one invoice for all tolls and fewer violations. Call 877-878-5970 or go to Prepass.com.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com, because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Landline Now, welcome back. Every week, we check in with Marty Ellis, who drives OOIDA's tour truck, the Spirit of the American Trucker. Marty has just finished up at one truck show and is just setting up now at one halfway across the country. But of course, he's still hearing about some of the hot topics of the day, including a longtime motor carrier going out of business and a problem a number of truckers are having with toll roads and transponders.
Carolina west to Denver, up to Bangor, west to Austin, coast to coast, sea to sea, sail on, sail on.
Well, Marty, how are things going?
I am lovely. And you, Mark?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much. Where are you at right now?
Well, we are just getting set up at the Great Salt Lake Truck Show here in Lehi, Utah at Thanksgiving Point. The Electric Park is what it's called over here. And this is our second time here. They always put on a good show, and it's a really neat park setting.
Well, that sounds interesting, and I know that's a growing truck show. It's been around for a few years now.
Yeah, I think it's their 35th year here as well, kind of like back in Waupun. That was their 35th year. Of course, theirs, it was the final year. So that was kind of, good and bad. I mean, I'm glad that it's gone that long up there at Waupun, but it was kind of sad to see it go, and had a really good time up there with Louie and Mark, and I'm sure over here at the show here in Salt Lake Lehi, that will enjoy it as well.
And of course, Louis Pugh, of course, you're talking about there, but also Mark Elrod, who's a member of the board of directors and a longtime trucker himself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they were both on hand, and so we got to talk to a lot of members and hopefully future members. And so it was a good time, hearing some of the Mark Elrod trucker stories, and that's always fun.
He does tell a good story. Well, let's get on to some of the issues here. There's a lot going on right now that you've indicated you're hearing about, and one of them is a company going out of business. What company is this, Marty?
Well, it's A&A Express. It's the company that I came from before I went to work for OOIDA, based out of Brandon, South Dakota. For the longest time, it was a family-owned operation. We went through a couple different owners before I came to work here. And it went from A&A Express to Roadrunner. They bought it and put several companies together in different areas. Ours was the refrigerated division. And then I don't know what all happened there with the whole debacle there at Roadrunner, but then a investment firm ended up purchasing it from Roadrunner. And now they are going out of business. And they had about 300 trucks, a little less than 300 trucks, about 80 company drivers from what I understand. And, with the landscape that we are in right now with the trucking industry as a whole, rates are down. One of the things I learned the other day from a friend was some of those long-term contracts nowadays, which a lot of people were depending on, have really shortened up their, quote, long-term contracts. And a couple of the companies, one, they renew the bidding every month, and the other one every other month. And that's pretty short-term contracts. Before it'd be 6 months to a year, depending on, who you were with and all. And now it's not like that in certain circumstances. And I don't know. I know that they're looking, in my mind, very short-term on this, as far as those companies that are hiring carriers, because at some point in time, all this is going to turn around, and there will be a bigger need for good quality carriers, whether it's the one truck operator or a small fleet or whoever. And I think some of this basically not treating your people well with these short-term contracts instead of long ones may come back and bite them. At least I hope it will. So maybe they'll learn some proper techniques, I'm thinking.
Yeah. Well, I hate to hear a company's going out, and the rest of that didn't sound too good either. But, whenever I hear investment firm got involved, I kind of figure things are not going in a good direction.
Yeah, and most of those investment firms, they don't know anything about trucking, don't understand how it works. I talked to the past owner, and the other day about, when I heard about the closing, and we discussed it a little bit, and they were good. They were a good family. They knew how to make money even in the tougher times. And I wish that they would have reached out more to him to maybe straighten this up, but I think a little bit too late, a little too late.
Okay. Well, let's go on to another topic. Unfortunately, it's not a happier one here, and it involves some problems that people are having on toll roads, which, that's a refrain we hear pretty often. What is the problem this time, Marty?
Yeah, we had one of our members stop in, and he was complaining about the Indiana toll roads in particular, that the transponder that he had in his truck would work to get onto the toll road, but when he went to get off, it would not debit the account, so he had to actually pay for it right then and there, which, number one, so many places aren't manned, so you have to press the button, talk to somebody, and then pay it. But most of the time, you have to pay the whole amount as if you drove the whole road, even if you only went a few miles down the road. So that particular member has contacted the toll road authority and tried to get it straightened out, but every time he does, it's just like talking to a brick wall, and they won't investigate. And because if it's registering you coming on, then they should be able to track that and know where you got on and where you got off. So there's really no reason why they can't fix the problem that they've been having, but they won't. And actually, we ran into that situation in Ohio and with the Spirit, and it did the same thing. It would recognize the transponder when we got on, but it wouldn't recognize it when we got off. So both times we ended up having to pay the full fare, and we weren't on the toll road that whole amount of time. So I think these states, of course, we don't like toll roads because toll roads are taxes. We just have a different name for them. But they need to get their act together and try to figure out how to fix this and how we can reimburse those companies that have overspent on their tolls.
Yeah, I don't even know in a case like that how you would prove to someone, here's where I came off or went onto the road, here's where I went off of the road, because the only thing you've got is that transponder. I mean, you don't have any other receipt or anything you can give them. So that would be a real problem.
And it is, yeah. And that's, he has been recording, every time he got on and where, and then every time where he got off, and when it messes up. And so he has it documented, but the proof is the problem.
Okay. Well, Marty, we're running a little bit short here, but we got some time to talk about where you're going next. So what's up on your schedule?
Our next stop will be the TA in Boise, Idaho. That'll be the 19th and the 20th. And the Petro in Spokane, Washington, the 22nd and 23rd.
Okay, and hopefully one of those, I guess maybe Spokane has a full service restaurant?
Both of them actually do. Boise has the Country Pride, and Spokane Petro has the Iron Skillet. So that should all be good for everybody to come in and sit down and have a good meal.
Okay. Any final words, Marty?
Hey, just be kind to one another and give that guy next to you a break.
Brothers of the highway, children of the wind.
Once again, that was Marty Ellis, who drives OOIDA's tour truck, The Spirit of the American Trucker. You can find Marty's next stop on our show and every day at our website, landlinenow.com. That includes truck stops, truck shows, and other special events across the country. Again, find that at landlinenow.com. That's our show. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Capital Reman is your leading source for quality remanufactured engines and components. Capital Reman stands ready to serve all OOIDA members to help reduce costly engine repairs or replacement. Visit capitalreman.com today and use code OOIDA10 to save.
ULSD is hurting your engine. Fight back with Howe's Diesel Defender. Get the most powerful cleaning and maximum lubricity to protect and extend the life of your entire system. At a guaranteed increase in fuel economy, and you can't go wrong with Howe's.
Dispatch, I picked up that load of steel, so I'm ready to roll.
Sounds good. Remember, we're getting paid by weight, so make sure to use a CAT scale.
I wouldn't weigh anywhere else.
Forget misaccuracy when you're truck on a CAT scale.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife,
I'm a writer,
photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
my kids,
chrome,
and I am
a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us!
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.